The coffee cup hit the counter with a sharp ceramic crack just as my daughter scrolled through my banking app, a twisted smile on her face. I stood there frozen, watching her swipe through my life savings like it was a catalog. The sound of that cup hitting the counter echoed in my chest louder than it did in the kitchen. While I stared at her perfectly manicured finger moving across that screen, I realized it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about how casually my own flesh and blood assumed I'd never notice, never say anything, never fight back. That same crack that once meant morning coffee now sounded like a warning bell I'd ignored for far too long. That's when the words came out of my mouth, cold and clear. Love isn't unconditional when respect died years ago. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The agony didn't register immediately. First came the sound, oh God, that horrible hollow slam as the car door crushed my hand against the frame. Mom, seriously, can you move any slower? Jennifer barked, already turning away, designer purse swinging from her shoulder. My gelato is literally melting in this heat. We were trapped in the Saturday chaos at Morrison's, squeezed between two enormous SUVs that made the parking space feel like a coffin. Shopping carts rattled past, children screamed, heat waves danced off the black asphalt. I had one last grocery bag to shift, my fingers cramping from carrying the others. I'm moving as quickly as these old bones will let me, I said, my left hand braced against the doorframe just trying to steady myself. These hands don't work like they used to, sweetheart, I just need one more. The door swung shut. Metal met flesh with a sickening thud that seemed to echo across the entire parking lot. My breath left my lungs in one ragged, broken gasp. For a moment, the world went white at the edges, spinning. Then the pain tore through my arm, hot and vicious, like every single bone in my hand had been struck with a sledgehammer. Oh my God, seriously? Jennifer huffed, keys dangling carelessly from her fingers. Why on earth would you put your hand there, Mom? Jennifer. I choked out, yanking desperately to free my trapped hand. She jerked the door open with an annoyed grunt. My hand fell against my chest, already swelling, already turning the most awful shades of purple and blue across my knuckles. She glanced down, gave my hand the quickest, most dismissive look imaginable, then straightened up and adjusted her sunglasses. You're fine. It's definitely not broken. Don't start with the drama, okay? Just don't start. Don't start. Those same words she'd used when I mentioned the stairs scaring me at night. The same phrase when I said her tone hurt my feelings. Don't start. Don't make trouble. Don't you dare make her feel guilty about anything ever. A small sedan waited impatiently a few spaces down, its driver watching us with dead eyes, just wanting us to move so they could have our spot. I cradled my throbbing hand against my chest and shuffled around to the passenger side like a wounded animal. In the car, she immediately cranked up the radio, pop music blasting to fill the suffocating silence between us. She drove aggressively, weaving through traffic, muttering curses at every slow driver while I sat there staring at my hand trembling violently in my lap. Every single bump in the road sent another lightning bolt of pain shooting up to my elbow, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. The bruise darkened with each passing mile as we wound through the foothills toward my neighborhood, spreading like spilled ink across my skin. You'll be totally fine, she announced when we pulled into my driveway, engine still running, her foot clearly hovering over the gas pedal. Just ice it or whatever people your age do, and please don't blame me for this later. I'm already running late for brunch, and Melissa will absolutely kill me if I miss mimosas again. Thank you for the ride home, I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. She was backing out of my driveway before I even reached the porch steps, gravel spraying. Inside, the house greeted me with its familiar scent of lemon furniture polish and that particular kind of quiet that only empty homes have. I set the grocery bags on the counter with my one good hand, completely forgot about the milk still sitting in her trunk, and finally looked at my hand under the harsh kitchen lights. Purple had swallowed the entire back of it, angry blue veins creeping in at the edges like dark roots. My fingers barely wanted to bend, each tiny movement sending fresh waves of agony through me. Maybe not broken, but oh God, there was definitely damage. Serious damage. I wrapped a faded dish towel around a bag of frozen peas from the freezer and pressed it to my skin, hissing sharply at the shocking cold against the heat of the injury. On the small wooden table by the window sat the floral journal Marcus had given me last Christmas, back when things still felt normal. "For your stories, Mom," he'd said with that gentle smile of his, "or just for you. Whatever you need it to be." I carried it slowly to the kitchen, opened to a blank page, and wrote with my good hand, my penmanship shaky and uneven. May 18th, 3:42 p.m. Car door slammed on left hand at Morrison's parking lot. Pain level 8 out of 10. Severe swelling, extensive bruising. Jennifer said, "You're fine. Don't start with the drama." The words looked so much harsher written on paper than they'd sounded in that hot parking lot. Or maybe I'd just trained myself over the years to soften them in my memory, to make excuses, to pretend things weren't as bad as they really were. The phone rang on the wall, shrill and jarring in the quiet house. I answered it with my heart already clenched tight in my chest. "Hey, Mom," Marcus said, his voice warm and concerned like always. "Just checking in on you. Everything okay today? You sound weird." I stared at the bruise, at the fresh ink on the journal page, at the bag of peas slowly melting in my trembling hand. "Everything's perfectly normal, sweetheart," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. There was a long pause, like he could hear something broken in my voice despite my best efforts. "Mom, you tell me if it wasn't, right?" he pressed gently. "You tell me the truth." My fingers tightened around the phone receiver as I stared at that open journal, at the very first concrete record of something I suddenly knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't keep pretending away anymore. But you'll have to wait to hear what happened next, because what Marcus did when he found out changed everything, and Jennifer's world was about to come crashing down in ways she never saw coming. Marcus showed up at my door before I'd even hung up the phone properly, before I'd even had time to process what I'd just written in that journal. Headlights swept across my living room windows like searchlights, then the familiar rumble of his pickup truck in the driveway. By the time I shuffled to the front door, he was already on the porch, knocking once before pushing the door open himself. "Mom," his voice had that edge I'd come to recognize over the years, worried and alert and ready to fix whatever was wrong. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw my hand. "What the hell happened?" Not really asking, more like demanding to know, his eyes immediately locked on the injury. Under the hallway light, the bruising looked even worse than it had in the kitchen, swollen and dark and angry. The skin stretched tight and shiny over my knuckles. I tried instinctively to tuck it against my side, to hide it from him. He caught my wrist so gently, carefully examining the damage. "Car door," I said quietly, "at the grocery store." She accidentally caught it when she was closing. His jaw visibly tensed, muscles jumping. "She clipped you." His eyes were already darkening with understanding. "Or she shut it." "Mom, be honest with me." "She shut it," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't move fast enough for her liking. He looked up at me sharply, and I saw something dangerous flash in his eyes. "Or she didn't bother looking where your hand was before she slammed it." I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The truth was too ugly. He guided me to the kitchen table the exact same way I used to guide him after Little League mishaps and playground accidents, back when he was small and I could still fix everything with a band-aid and a kiss. "Sit, Mom," he said, already at the sink washing his hands, grabbing a clean dish towel from the drawer he knew so well. "Just sit down and let me help you." "You didn't have to drive all the way over here for this," I protested weakly. "I'm managing just fine on my own." Yeah, he cut me off, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. I absolutely did have to come. This is not nothing, Mom. Look at your hand. Really look at it. He unwrapped the sopping bag of peas, set it gently aside, and examined my hand with the kind of careful attention that made my throat tight. His fingers were so careful, but his eyes, oh, his eyes weren't calm at all. This didn't come from a gentle accident, he murmured, more to himself than to me. This came from force. Real force. There was a familiar double tap at the back door, brisk and businesslike. Marcus opened it to find Patricia standing there with a large plastic tote overflowing with medical supplies, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Saw your truck," she said matter-of-factly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Figured I'd bring the actual medical supplies instead of frozen vegetables." Her sharp gaze landed on my hand and her expression hardened immediately. "Oh honey, that looks absolutely brutal." "Feels even worse than it looks," I admitted, trying to smile and failing completely. Patricia pulled up a chair like she'd done this 1,000 times in her paralegal days, all business and efficiency. Cool water in a bowl, clean towel, antiseptic ointment, proper gauze. Marcus hovered nearby, arms crossed tightly over his chest, radiating tension. "So," he said finally, his voice dangerously quiet, "are you going to tell me what actually happened, the real story, or do I have to drag the truth out of Jennifer?" I stared at the wood grain pattern on my kitchen table, tracing it with my eyes, anything to avoid looking at him. She was in a hurry. A big hurry for brunch with her friends. I was moving too slowly for her taste. She slammed the door without checking where my hand was positioned, and when I told her it hurt, she said I was being dramatic and that I should stop starting trouble. "And after you told her you were hurt," he pressed, his voice getting tighter with each word. "She said I was fine, that it definitely wasn't broken, and that I shouldn't start with the drama." Those were her exact words. Then she left me here and sped off to her mimosas. Marcus swore viciously under his breath, fists clenching on the table. Patricia's mouth flattened into a grim line. "That's not a one-time thing," Patricia said quietly, looking directly at me with knowing eyes. "That particular tone, that specific kind of dismissiveness. That's been around for a good long while, hasn't it, Dorothy?" I let out a breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding in my chest for what felt like years. "It's been building for years now," I admitted, my voice getting thinner and shakier. Little comments here and there, constant eye rolls, the way she talks to me like I'm just this burden she has to deal with, this inconvenient obligation. My voice cracked. But this is the first time my body actually matched how it's felt inside for so long. Marcus's hands curled into tight fists on the table, knuckles white. "I'm calling her right now. We're settling this tonight." "No," I said sharper than I meant to, startling both of them. They both stared at me. "If you call her, Marcus, she'll twist the entire thing around. She always does. She's a master at it. I'll end up being the one apologizing just to stop all the noise and accusations." "So what do we do then?" he asked, frustration and helplessness mixing in his voice. "We just let her get away with this. Again." Patricia reached across the table for my floral journal, scanned the fresh entry I'd written, then nodded decisively toward the counter. "Dorothy, you got any spare notebooks lying around? Anything will work." I frowned, confused, then shuffled over to the messy junk drawer and pulled out a small spiral notepad with a faded grocery store logo on the front, the kind they give away for free. Patricia slid it in front of me with purpose. "Start keeping a detailed record. Dates, exact words, specific incidents, anything and everything that makes you feel dismissed, belittled, or unsafe. Don't keep it all locked up in your head where she can make you doubt yourself. Write it down. Make it real." "I'm not trying to build some kind of legal case against my own daughter," I said weakly, the words feeling wrong in my mouth. "You're not building a case," Patricia replied firmly. "You're building clarity for yourself. So that later, when someone, probably Jennifer herself, tries to tell you that you're overreacting or being too sensitive or making things up, you'll have concrete proof that you're absolutely not." Marcus exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Please, Mom," he said quietly, reaching over to squeeze my good hand. "For me, just this once, don't let this incident vanish into thin air like all the other times she's hurt you. Please don't let her erase this." The notebook sat there between us on the table. Cheap cardboard cover, bright blue lines waiting to be filled. I picked up a pen with my good hand, my fingers trembling slightly. For a long moment, I just sat there listening to the refrigerator humming its familiar song, to Marcus's uneven breathing beside me, to my own pulse beating frantically behind that awful bruise. At the very top of the first page, I wrote in neat, deliberate letters that got firmer with each word, "Jennifer, incidents and patterns." The words looked stark and final sitting there on that cheap paper, like a label on a file folder that could never be thrown away, never be ignored. I underlined it once, the pen digging deep into the paper, scoring it. As that line cut across the page, a thought flickered through my mind, sharp and unsettling and terrifying. If I keep going down this road, if I keep documenting everything, I'm not just protecting myself anymore. I might be documenting my way completely out of my own daughter's life. But then I looked at my hand, at the violent purple and blue spreading across my skin, and I knew I didn't have a choice anymore. And what I wrote in that notebook over the next few days would lead me to a decision that would change everything, a decision that would make Jennifer's betrayal look like child's play compared to what I was about to do to her entire future. Drop a heart emoji if you think she's doing the right thing by documenting everything. And if you've ever felt dismissed by family, you know exactly how this feels. The bruise on my hand started turning that sickly yellow-green color that means healing, but the bruise in my chest, that invisible wound, that one didn't fade at all. 3 days after the car door incident, Patricia and I sat at my kitchen table with lukewarm coffee between us and that little blue notebook sitting right there between my elbows like evidence at a trial. A few pages were already filled with my careful handwriting, dates and phrases and tiny scenes that physically hurt to remember and write down. Patricia pushed her reading glasses up her nose and studied the pages. "Dorothy, honey, you've got enough documented in here to make a family court judge sit up and pay attention," she said quietly, tapping the page. "I'm not planning on going to any court," I replied quickly, maybe too quickly. "I'm just trying desperately not to gaslight myself anymore, you know? To not let her convince me I'm crazy or too sensitive." She gave me a short, approving nod. "Good. That's exactly the right reason." I traced the rim of my chipped coffee mug with one finger, feeling the faint pull and ache in my healing hand. "Patricia," I said suddenly, surprising even myself, "do you happen to know anybody who helps people, regular people, put their end-of-life affairs in order? Someone professional who won't fold like a cheap card table if an angry family member starts throwing a tantrum?" Her answer came immediately, without hesitation. "Thomas Sullivan. Downtown." The name landed with real weight between us. "He does estate work primarily," she continued, leaning forward. "Trusts, wills, end-of-life directives, all of it. He's smart as hell, experienced, and he has absolutely zero patience for bullies wearing expensive shoes and fake smiles. I've sat directly across from him in tense conference rooms before. The man does not flinch, Dorothy. Not even a little bit. And he works with regular everyday people?" I asked carefully. "Not just folks with mansions and vacation homes and trust funds. Dorothy, listen to me. You've got a house that's paid off, a decent pension coming in, some savings you've worked your whole life for. That little piece of land your parents left you up in the hills. That's real wealth, honey. That matters. That's worth protecting. You should call him." She was already digging through her enormous purse, fishing around until she pulled out a slightly worn business card. She slid it across the table toward me like it was a lifeline. White cardstock, simple blue lettering, a tasteful logo of perfectly balanced scales. I stared at the phone number like it might burn my fingers if I touched it. Calling that number felt like crossing a line I'd been carefully tiptoeing along for years and years, maybe decades. Patricia leaned in closer, her voice gentle but firm. You don't have to decide what to actually do yet, Dorothy. Not right this second. Just talk to the man. Find out what your options really are. Knowledge isn't betrayal, honey. Knowledge is power. That afternoon, after she left and the house fell silent again, the card stayed right there on the table, staring at me accusingly every single time I walked past it. It followed me into the living room when I finally moved it there. It sat beside me on the couch while some mindless game show chattered away on the television. Finally, during a commercial break for denture cream, I picked up my phone. My hand shook, but only a little bit, as I carefully dialed the number. Sullivan Law Offices, a receptionist answered, her voice crisp but genuinely kind-sounding. 20 minutes later, after explaining what I needed in the vaguest possible terms, I had a consultation appointment set for the following Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Just bring any relevant deeds, account statements, current will if you have one, and any beneficiary forms, she said kindly. Mr. Sullivan will walk you through everything else. Don't worry about understanding it all right now. When I hung up the phone, the house felt fundamentally different somehow. Not louder exactly, just more solid, more real, like the walls themselves had heard me choose something, heard me take action, and they approved. That night, I pulled the old metal file box down from the hall closet, dust puffing up in clouds as I set it heavily on the coffee table. Inside were neat folders I'd labeled years ago in my most careful handwriting: house documents, bank accounts, insurance policies, pension information. I spread them all out like I was playing some card game I didn't know the rules to yet. Every single document I touched carried a memory attached to it, some pleasant, most painful. The mortgage paperwork from 20 years ago, Jennifer refusing to come to the closing because she said sitting around watching people sign boring papers was a waste of her precious time. The life insurance beneficiary form with a note scribbled in the corner in my own handwriting: called Jennifer, no answer, left message. The beneficiary designation I'd carefully filled out after my husband died suddenly, his name crossed out with shaking hands and replaced with both children's names. Equal shares. Always equal, always fair, even when fair felt like a lie. My phone buzzed loudly on the table beside all that history spread out like my life on display. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen, bright and demanding. My thumb hovered over the answer button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. Voicemail picked it up after the 4th ring with its automated voice. A minute later, another call. Same name flashing, same impossible choice. 2 missed calls now. 1 new voicemail waiting. I couldn't bring myself to press play. I couldn't handle hearing her voice right then, couldn't handle whatever demands or complaints or casual cruelty she'd left on that message. When Marcus stopped by the next day carrying bags of takeout barbecue that smelled like heaven, those folders were still spread all over my coffee table like evidence of a life lived. "What's all this?" he asked, setting the food down carefully, his eyes scanning the documents. I told him everything. About Patricia, about Thomas Sullivan, about the appointment I'd made for Wednesday morning downtown. He sank slowly into the chair opposite me, and I watched his shoulders loosen like he'd been holding something impossibly heavy up for years and could finally set it down. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been hoping you'd do something like this for literal years now." "Years? You have?" I blinked at him, genuinely surprised. "You never said anything." "I see how she talks to you," he said, anger creeping into his voice. "How she only shows up when she wants something, needs something. How she disappears for months and then acts like you're the problem. He reached over and tapped one of the folders firmly. You deserve to feel safe, Mom. Even on paper. Especially on paper. I looked down at those stacks of documents. My entire adult life boiled down to pages and signatures and legal language. Beyond the window, the late afternoon light pressed through the trees, turning my small yard that soft gold color that only happens right before sunset. On the coffee table, my blue incident notebook lay open to a brand new entry I'd written that morning, 2 phone calls from Jennifer. No apology. No concern about my hand. Let both calls ring through to voicemail. I thought about all those Christmases where she'd shown up hours late and left early, barely staying for dinner. Those birthdays where my gift was always a last-minute candle from the drugstore and a complaint about traffic. Those Mother's Days where she'd post these elaborate tributes online with old photos but forget to actually call me until late evening, and even then only if I called her first. Little cuts, all of them. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. All logged now in blue ink in that notebook. I gathered all the documents into one overstuffed folder and held it against my chest. It felt so much heavier than paper should ever feel. Marcus, I said slowly, carefully, if I decide to actually change things, to really change how everything is set up, it's not going to be pretty. You understand that, right? Jennifer will lose her mind. His eyes met mine, steady and sure and unflinching. It's already not pretty, Mom, he said quietly. It hasn't been pretty for a long, long time. At least this way, you're the one holding the pen. You're the one making the choices for once instead of just accepting whatever she decides to dish out. Later that night, alone in the quiet house, I slid Thomas Sullivan's business card into the very front of that overstuffed folder, right on top of all those old decisions I'd made years ago, back when I still foolishly believed that love would eventually feel like actual love again if I just waited long enough, sacrificed enough, stayed silent enough. My phone buzzed again on the table, lighting up the darkened room like a beacon. Jennifer's name flashed across the screen over and over, insistent and demanding. I watched it vibrate and light up, her name appearing and disappearing, while that folder containing my entire future sat there in my lap, heavy and full of possibility. This time, I didn't even reach for the phone. Didn't even consider it. And Wednesday morning was coming fast, and what I was about to learn in that downtown office would give me the power to do something Jennifer never saw coming, something that would rewrite her entire future in ways she couldn't even imagine yet. Comment Justice if you think she deserves to take back control of her life. This is about to get real. Downtown felt different on a Wednesday morning when you weren't rushing, when you actually had time to notice things. The mountains framed the streets in soft blue shadows against a pale morning sky. Small cafes were just opening their doors, chalkboards being dragged outside with neat cursive specials written in colored chalk. I clutched my overstuffed folder against my chest like armor and followed the address on that business card to a brick building with tall windows and a small brass plaque by the door. Sullivan Law, Estate and Trust Services. Inside, the air smelled like fresh coffee and old paper and something faintly like oranges. A young woman at the front desk smiled at me without that strained, overly careful politeness people sometimes reserve for elderly folks, like we might break if they're not gentle enough. Mrs. Carter, she asked warmly. Yes, I managed. I have an appointment with Mr. Sullivan. He's ready for you. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Water would be lovely, I said, suddenly aware of how dry my throat had become. She led me down a quiet hallway to an office with a glass door and my name written on a little temporary sign, like I'd been expected, like I mattered. I stepped inside carefully. Thomas Sullivan stood as I entered. Early 50s maybe, distinguished salt and pepper at his temples, navy suit but no tie, approachable. His handshake was firm without being crushing, his gaze direct without being intimidating. Mrs. Carter, I'm Thomas, he said warmly. Please, come in and sit wherever you're most comfortable. His office wasn't intimidating at all despite all my fears. Yes, there were floor-to-ceiling shelves of impressive law books, but there were also framed photographs of local hiking trails on the walls, a handmade pottery mug on his desk, a thriving plant in the corner that someone clearly cared for. The blinds were half open, letting in thin lines of beautiful mountain light. I sat in the comfortable chair opposite his desk, setting my folder down like it might explode if I dropped it too hard. "So," he said gently, settling in with a fresh legal pad at the ready, "tell me what brings you in today, Mrs. Carter. Whatever version of events feels true to you is the right version." Nobody had ever phrased it quite that way before. Nobody had ever given me permission to just tell my truth without judging it first. I told him. Not everything, there wasn't nearly enough time in one appointment for an entire lifetime, but enough. The car door crushing my hand, the words she'd said afterward, the years and years of little jabs and dismissals. The holidays where I'd felt like an unwelcome guest in my own daughter's life. The blue notebook sitting on my kitchen table now. Page after page of small cruelties that didn't leave the kind of bruises you could photograph for evidence. He didn't interrupt me once. His pen moved occasionally across that legal pad, but mostly he just listened with his head slightly tilted, expression sober and thoughtful, never pitying. When I finally finished, the room felt very, very quiet. "So currently," he said gently, "your will splits everything equally between both children, is that correct?" "Yes," I whispered. 50-50. Always tried to be fair. "And how does that feel?" he asked carefully, "given everything you just told me?" I looked down at my folded hands in my lap. The faint yellowing across my knuckles had almost completely faded now. But inside it still throbbed like a fresh wound. "It feels," I said very slowly, the words coming from somewhere deep and honest, "like rewarding someone for treating me terribly just because I happened to give birth to her. Like I'm paying her to hurt me." He nodded once, like my answer matched something in his own experience, something he'd seen before. Then he said, in that same calm tone he might use to explain a simple tax form, "Mrs. Carter, you need to understand something fundamental. You're not obligated to leave anyone anything. Not anyone." The sentence landed like a bell being rung. Clear, solid, impossible to unhear. I blinked at him, stunned. Even your own children." "Even your own children," he confirmed. "Especially your own children if they've earned being excluded. People confuse biology with automatic entitlement. Your estate is yours, Mrs. Carter. You built it. You get to decide who has actually earned a place in it." I sat with that truth, letting it sink in. All those years I just assumed I had to be fair, had to split things equally, even when nothing about how I was being treated felt remotely fair. "What would you like to see happen?" he asked. "If we imagine this as a completely clean slate?" The answer came easier than I'd ever expected it to. "Marcus and his daughter Lily get everything," I said, my voice getting stronger. "A little bit of money set aside to help people my age who don't have a Marcus or a Patricia. Less fear that Jennifer could swoop in one day when I'm gone and make everything harder for the people who actually showed up for me." My voice cracked with emotion. "I want to protect the ones who protected me." A small, approving smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "We can absolutely work with that, Mrs. Carter." For the next hour, we went through everything systematically. The house, all my accounts, that precious scrap of land my parents had left me up in the mountains. He translated all the confusing legal language into plain English, never once talking down to me, never making me feel stupid for asking questions. He suggested legal structures I hadn't even known existed, protections I didn't know were possible. When we came to the part about Jennifer, he didn't even flinch, didn't hesitate. "If you choose to exclude her entirely," he said matter-of-factly, "I strongly recommend including what's called a no-contest clause. It actively discourages legal challenges. We can also be extremely clear in your documents that these are your carefully considered decisions, made while you're fully competent and of sound mind. We'll document everything. So if she gets angry later and tries to fight it, I began. You'll have already spoken for yourself, he finished firmly. In writing. Clearly. Legally. She can be as angry as she wants, but your voice will be heard. By the time he pushed a draft summary across the desk toward me, my old folder was thinner, previous versions marked up in red pen, new pages clipped neatly together at the front. My entire life, rearranged on paper. How do you feel? He asked, watching my face carefully. I'd expected crushing guilt. I'd expected panic and second-guessing and shame. Instead, I felt taller somehow, lighter, as if someone had removed a weight from my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying for decades. Like I just locked my front door for the very first time in my life, I said, and laughed, actually laughed. Like I finally have control over my own house. He nodded like he'd heard that exact metaphor before from other clients. We scheduled a signing date for the finalized documents. He walked me all the way back to the reception desk himself, shook my hand again. On the sidewalk outside, the air felt sharper and cleaner. The sky seemed a little bit bluer. Cars passed by. People laughed outside a nearby cafe. A street musician tuned his guitar across the street, the notes floating on the breeze. I held that updated folder close to my chest. Lighter now physically, but infinitely more powerful. My phone buzzed insistently in my purse. I pulled it out, already knowing. One new text from Jennifer, "Mom, we need to talk. Call me." I stared at the notification, my thumb hovering over it, the ink on my future still metaphorically wet. And for the first time in my entire life, I wondered not what she wanted from me this time, but what exactly I was still willing to give her. If anything at all. Because the answer was about to be nothing, and she had no idea whatsoever that her inheritance had just vanished into thin air, and the explosion when she finally found out would be absolutely nuclear. Type, "She deserves nothing if you're Team Dorothy all the way." Thomas laid 3 neat stacks of papers on the conference room table like he was dealing cards in the most important game of my life. "Final versions," he said calmly. "Nothing gets signed unless it feels completely right to you, Mrs. Carter. You're in control here." At the very top of the first page, in bold black letters, "Last will and testament of Dorothy and Carter." I slid my reading glasses on with trembling fingers and read. Marcus's name appeared first. The house, my savings, that beautiful sliver of mountain land my parents had left me. Lily's name followed with clean, clear contingencies spelled out in plain English that even I could understand. Then my eyes caught on a sentence in the middle of the page. Simple and absolutely devastating. "I intentionally make no provision whatsoever for my daughter, Jennifer Marie Carter. Not by accident. Not by oversight. But by deliberate, considered choice." My pulse ticked frantically in my throat. That's very clear," I managed. "It needs to be crystal clear," Thomas replied. "No room for misinterpretation." He turned the page, tapping a paragraph printed in bold. "This is your no contest clause. If anyone challenges this will and loses, they receive absolutely nothing. It signals to any court that you knew exactly what you were doing." "I did know," I said, and realized with a shock that it was absolutely true. "I do know." The next section described a scholarship I was creating, the Martin and Helen Peterson Memorial Fund for local seniors pursuing careers in public service. My parents' names on something that moved forward, that helped people, not just carved on a cold stone nobody visited. "They worked so hard their whole lives," I murmured, touching the page. "Nobody ever put their names on anything meaningful. Now they have a real legacy," Thomas said warmly, courtesy of their daughter who remembered them. When everything matched what we discussed, he said quietly, a pen appeared by my hand. The witnesses stepped in silently. The notary hovered nearby with her official stamp. I signed over and over, each signature another inch of distance between me and the daughter who had slammed that car door on my hand and my heart. After the witnesses left, Thomas slid one final blank page toward me. "Your personal statement," he said. "No legal language required. Just you. Your voice. Your truth." The words came easier than I'd ever expected they would. I wrote about Marcus showing up without being asked, about Lily's constant kindness, about how love without basic respect isn't really love at all. Then near the end, my hand moving almost on its own, "Respect was the price you stopped paying, Jennifer. So inheritance is the consequence you earned." Thomas read it, nodded once firmly. That says everything it needs to say. By late afternoon, my most precious heirlooms were boxed up and stacked safely in Marcus's hall closet. Photo albums, my mother's engagement ring, my husband's love letters from when we were young. If Jennifer ever tore through my house looking for things to claim, she'd find nothing but empty spaces where the real treasures used to be. When I got home, the sky was going orange and pink. I just stepped out of my car when another engine cut off loudly behind me. "Mom!" Jennifer called out cheerfully, hopping out of her expensive car, designer sunglasses perched on her head, a too bright smile plastered across her face. "Thought I'd surprise you with a visit." My newly signed will pressed against my side in my purse, every word still fresh, every decision final. And my daughter, completely erased from my entire future, walked up the driveway like absolutely nothing in the world had changed. Tell me in the comments what you think Dorothy should do next. And if you've dealt with something similar in your own family, please share your story. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Jennifer followed me inside like she owned the place, like she'd never slammed a car door on my hand and driven away. "God, I swear this view gets better every single year," she said, dropping her designer bag carelessly on my chair. "You should really think about Airbnb this place, Mom. You're literally sitting on a gold mine here." "I like living in it," I said quietly, setting my purse containing my new will on the entry table. In the kitchen, she unpacked a plastic container with theatrical flair. "Got you that kale salad you mentioned liking once, and look, cupcakes. Though honestly you probably shouldn't eat too many of those." She laughed that sharp laugh. "Cholesterol and all that at your age, you know." "Thank you," I said flatly, taking out plates. We sat. She talked endlessly about work drama, a coworker's messy divorce, some reality TV show I'd never heard of. I nodded in all the right places, eating my salad, waiting for the real reason she'd come. For the turn. It always came. It came midway through her second helping of my salad. "So," she said super casually, "what's the long-term plan with this place? You know, realistically." "The plan," I said carefully, "is that I live here." She smiled like I was being adorably naive. "Sure, for now obviously, but you know how these things go, Mom. Stairs become dangerous. Roofs need replacing. Medical stuff piles up. You don't want to leave a giant mess for your kids to deal with. It's absolutely brutal when parents don't think ahead." "I've thought ahead quite a bit actually," I said. Her fork paused mid-air. "You have?" "Yes." "How exactly?" She set her fork down. "Because a folder on the counter doesn't count as actual planning, Mom. You know I'm really the only one who gets this complicated stuff. Marcus is sweet and all, but he'd absolutely drown in paperwork and legal things. He's not equipped for this." "It's handled," I repeated firmly. She sat back in her chair, studying me with narrowed eyes. "Handled how exactly?" "I met with an attorney. Everything is in writing now. Legally documented. Annoyance flashed across her face, quick and sharp. Without talking to me first. Seriously. It's my name on all the documents, Jennifer. Yeah, but I'm your daughter. Her voice started thinning out, getting higher. When parents don't plan things right, it all lands on their kids. I see it literally everywhere. My friends absolutely crushed trying to deal with houses, junk, medical bills. Ungrateful parents just draining their kids completely dry. Ungrateful parents. I set my fork down very carefully. Is that what I am to you? I asked quietly. A drain? She made an exasperated face. Oh my God, don't be so literal about everything. I'm talking about patterns in general, okay? But I mean, rides everywhere, constant errands, emotional labor. It's a lot sometimes. Sometimes it feels like you forget I have my own life too. I remember every single ride, I said, my voice getting quieter. Every shift I worked when you were young. Every sacrifice. I just don't remember ever once calling you a burden. That was different. I was a child. You literally signed up for that. I looked her straight in the eyes. You've made your opinions about me crystal clear for years now, Jennifer. About aging parents. About needy seniors. About what parents supposedly owe and what children definitely don't. I finally believe you. I'm finally listening. Color rose dramatically in her face. So that's it. You run off to some random lawyer, cut me out of God knows what, then act like I'm the problem for asking reasonable questions. I never said what I did, I replied evenly. You did though. She pushed her chair back hard, the legs scraping loudly. You know what? This is exactly why people don't help their parents anymore. Everything is always drama. Dramatic seniors, I swear. She grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. Jennifer. Save it, she snapped. She slammed the front door so hard the frame rattled. The quiet that followed felt clean. Pure. Like fresh air after a storm. I walked slowly to the refrigerator and peeled down the emergency contact sheet held up by a magnet. Jennifer's name sat at the very top in ink I'd once thought was permanent. I drew a single straight line through it. In the empty space above, I wrote in careful letters, Marcus Carter, son. Patricia Reynolds, neighbor. I pinned it back up and stepped away, feeling the shift settle into place like puzzle pieces finally fitting. For the first time in my life, if something happened to me, Jennifer would be the absolute last to know. And I felt safer that way. Months passed. The blue notebook filled up. The documentation grew. And then one ordinary afternoon, Patricia's knock sounded sharper than usual. When I opened the door, she was already frowning, phone clutched in her hand. You off social media again? She asked. Mostly, why? Because your daughter's using it as a microphone to trash you publicly. She marched to my kitchen table and set the phone down between us like evidence. It was Jennifer's perfectly curated page. Professional headshot, carefully filtered life. Underneath, a fresh post that made my blood run cold. Public service announcement, being an only daughter means you're automatically the therapist, the Uber driver, and the retirement fund all rolled into one exhausting package. Some aging parents think guilt equals a financial plan. Sorry, but dramatic seniors will drain you completely dry if you let them. Boundaries, people. Boundaries. Hashtag, parenting your parents. Hashtag, entitled seniors. My name wasn't explicitly there, but it might as well have been written in neon lights. The comments were mixed. OMG, same girl. Old folks are so entitled. Cut them off if they won't respect your boundaries. But also, this sounds like there's way more to this story. Parents don't usually do this for no reason. If my kid talked about me like this publicly, I'd redo my will too, just saying. Well, Patricia said, dry as desert dust, if you ever need to prove what she really thinks of you, she just published it for the world to see. Can you send me that screenshot? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Already did, she said, tapping twice. Print it. File it. After she left, I did exactly that. Screenshot, print, slide it carefully into a plastic protective sleeve. The paper felt heavier than it should as I tucked it into my estate folder behind my will and my personal letter. A little exhibit labeled, "This is how she chose to speak about me publicly." The next day, I attended a support group at the community center. Support for older adults with difficult children, the sign read. People went around the circle sharing. A son who only called for money. A daughter who threatened to dump her mother in a facility if she didn't hand over the house deed. When it was my turn, I said clearly, "I'm Dorothy." My daughter slammed a car door on my hand, drove away, then went online to call me a dramatic burden. Nods all around. No shock. Just understanding. "And what are you doing to protect yourself?" the facilitator asked gently. "I changed all my paperwork," I said. "And she doesn't know yet." "Good," an older woman across from me said firmly. "You don't owe advance notice to people who have earned consequences." I wrote that down. The explosion came 3 months later. The envelope from Thomas looked innocent enough. Thin, white, professional. I opened it at my kitchen counter. "Just a courtesy update, Mrs. Carter. Your daughter's attorney contacted my office requesting clarification about her inheritance expectations. Per your documents and instructions," I responded, "there is nothing for her to inherit." Below was the printed email. That line, set off on its own. There is nothing for her to inherit. I read it twice. My stomach didn't drop. It settled. The phone call came within the hour. "What did you do?" Jennifer shrieked. "No hello. No breath. My attorney just got your lawyer's email. He said there is nothing for me." "Are you out of your mind?" "I'm not out of my mind," I said calmly. "And Patricia didn't sign anything." "I did. Every page. Every decision. You're punishing me because you can't handle boundaries. You think Jason didn't eat this up? He's been getting for my share since Dad died." "My decisions are my own," I said. "So are the consequences." She laughed, ugly and sharp. "Consequences for who, Mom? When you're old and sick and your golden boy can't drop everything." "I'm done being threatened with hypothetical scenarios," I cut in. "I'm allowed to decide where my life's work goes. You decided how you talk about me. We're both living with our choices." The line went dead. That night, she posted again, "Wild when your own mother lets jealous siblings and nosy neighbors manipulate her into cutting you out of everything." But the comments weren't on her side. Sounds like there's more to this story. Parents don't usually do this for no reason. Jennifer arrived at my house days later like a hurricane. Stomping up my steps, sunglasses on her head, eyes wild. "We're doing this in person," she snapped. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. "Did you seriously cut me out of everything?" she demanded. "The kind of mother who got tired of being treated like a burden," I said evenly. "After everything I've done, rides, errands, checking in. One requirement," I said. "Respect." You stopped meeting it. Then came tears. Mascara threatening to run. "You have no idea how hard things are for me." Then threats. "When people find out what you did, you're going to be the villain. And when you're stuck in some home, don't you dare expect me to visit." "I'm not arguing with you," I said quietly. I've made my decisions. You can still fix this. No, I said. The word landed like a brick. This is my home. You don't get to stand on my porch and scream because you don't like what you earned. Her mouth twisted. You chose them. Remember that. I do, I said clearly. I stepped backward and closed the door. She shouted something I didn't catch. Heels on steps. Car door slam. Engine roaring away. Marcus showed up minutes later. I just passed Hurricane Jennifer. You okay? I'm fine, I said. I didn't let her in. A slow, proud smile. I'm proud of you, Mom. Months later, I rewrote my own obituary. Drew a line through Jennifer's name under survived by. Rewrote it, survived by her son Marcus Carter and beloved granddaughter Lily Carter, as well as dear friends who became family. The funeral director responded, got it. We'll keep this on file. I moved to a smaller cottage. Warm colors, big windows, no stairs. Lily decorated it with love. And one quiet evening, sitting under her painting of my safe place, I realized something profound. Jennifer still told everyone who'd listen that I'd betrayed her. But here, in this smaller, brighter life filled with people who actually knew me, I had proof that I hadn't lost a family. I'd finally finished choosing one. And somewhere out there, Jennifer had no idea that one day she'd open a newspaper and see my name. With hers nowhere on the page. No inheritance. No mention. No final word. Just the consequence she earned. And I was finally, completely, beautifully at peace.